Chapter of Malachi, the final chapter of the prophets, the Nevi'im, Hineni Sholeach Malachi. Ufina derech lefanai, ufitom yavo el hichalo hadon asher atem v'akshim umalach habrit asher atem chafetzim hinei va amar Adonai tzvot. God says, I'm sending my messenger to clear the road before me, and then the God who you will seek will come suddenly, and the angel that you desire, he has already come. Is this an allusion perhaps to Zerubbabel, to others, messianic figures? Is this something that's in the future? It says it's pitom, it says it's going to be sudden. Umi mechalkel et yom ba'o, mi haomeid be'hei ra'ato, ki hu ke'esh mitzaref u'chuvrit mechabsim. But who can endure the day of his coming? Who will hold out when he appears? Because God it's a fire, it's strong, it's difficult, right? So many of the books, the apocalyptic messages that we've had. God will be like a smelter. We had that in the previous book. And a purger of silver will purify the descendants of Levi's and refine them like God refines gold and silver. And of course, they're burnt up. There are people who don't make it through when you have this refining process. And then they will present their offerings in righteousness. The ones who are able, the other ones, they're going to be cut out. They're going to be left. They're not going to be there. Here we have a verse that we recite every day at the end, sort of after, quote unquote, the Shemona Esrei, then the offerings of Judah and Jerusalem will be pleasing to God as in the days of old. This nostalgia for the past, things in the past were perfect. Word arev, meaning they were pretty, they were beautiful. And there's very interesting things said about this verse, not related to the sort of the chapter here, but just in general, that the great Rav Avram Yitzchak HaKohen Kook, the first quote-unquote Ashkenazi chief rabbi of Israel. I say first because there was no state of Israel when he died in 1935, but he's understood as being the first chief rabbi of Israel. He's the sort of the spiritual leader, mentor, and guide of the Dati Le'umi, of the religious Zionist community in Israel. His pictures up all over the place. Wrote many, many books, really unparalleled Talmud Chacham in many ways. He was known to be a vegetarian. On Shabbos, I believe he would have chicken and meat because it was a mitzvah. But the rest of the time he would be a vegetarian. He's pointed to this verse and said in the future, sacrifices are not going to be animals. Sacrifices are only going to be meal offerings, grain offerings, right? What does it say? It specifies the mincha offering. A mincha is a grain offering, a meal offering. The sacrifices are going to be beautiful. It's not going to be animal. He turns to a chapter that we learned in Yeshaya. It talks about the lion sleeping with the lamb. Presumably it's understood by many and most as being, sort of a metaphor. The Jews and their enemies will live together. We won't have the anti-Semitism anymore. He takes it also as literal. The animals will come closer to God, back like in the Garden of Eden, where the animals closer to humans and having greater knowledge, and thus we're not going to be bringing them a sacrifice. The only sacrifice we're going to bring are flour offerings, and so that's an inspiring phrase for people who are vegetarians and vegans in Jewish life. Continuing verse 5, V'karafti aleichem l'mishpat v'ayiti eid memaher b'mechshafim u'v'minafim u'v'nishba'im la'shakar v'oshkei sachar sachir almana v'yatom. But first, I will step forward to judge you, and I will be a relentless accuser of those who don't fear me, those who worship sort of idols and commit adultery and sorcery and cheat and steal and subvert and take advantage of the widow and the orphan and the stranger. Right, the categories that we have so often in the Torah, ger, yatom, ve'almana, those who are at a harder place in society, those who we're supposed to protect. Pasuk Vav, verse 6, Ki ani Adonai lo shiniti, v'atem bnei Yaakov lo chlitem. I am God, I've not changed. I told you all the way back in the Torah, ger, yatom, ve'almana, over and over again. Build this just society. That's what I want. I didn't change. What I told you then, I'm telling you now. And I have not ceased to be your God. You are still around. Going back to the beginning of this book, you complain, God, you don't love us. Well, we got rid of Edom. They couldn't rebuild. They tried to rebuild. It was destroyed. You've rebuilt. You're back in Jerusalem. You're back. You have your own ability to build your own society again. And from the days of your ancestors, you turned away from my laws. You turned away from me. And now I tell you, Shuva Eli, return to me, va'ashuva aleichem, and I will return to you. And you ask me, how should I return? How is that done? Verse 8, Vayikba Adam Elohim ki atem kovim oti, v'amartem b'mek kiva'unucha, ha'ma'aser v'atruma. I say to you, should mortals be cheating God? But you're cheating, you're defrauding me. And you say, how could we doing it? How are we cheating you? And I tell you, through your tithes, through your contribution, you're not giving the right amount. You're keeping it for yourselves instead of giving to the temple, instead of giving to the poor. B'ma'arei, atem ne'arim v'ati atem kovim hagoy kulo. You're suffering under a curse, but you go on defrauding me. All of you, the whole nation, right? If you were good to me, I'll be good to you. Return to me, and I will return to you. Haviyu et kol ha'maser al beit ha'otzar v'yiteref beiti v'chanunai nabazot amar Adonai tzvaot im lo eftach lachem et arubot hashamayim v'arikoti lachem bracha ad b'lidai. So he starts with the priests. The priests were the ones who are treating God disrespectfully, who are bringing the junk to the temple, the animals with blemishes, and perhaps because of that, the rest of Israel, the whole nation, is not treating the temple properly, is not giving the proper sacrifice, not bringing the proper gifts to the temple, and thus you are suffering. And thus God says, bring, fill the storehouse, be charitable, let there be food in my house. And if you do this, God says, I promise, I will open the floodgates of the sky for you, and I will pour upon you, harukati, it will be overflowing for you, blessing ad b'lidai, with no limitation. You act properly, you treat people properly, you don't defraud them, you bring the right things to the temple, bracha will be without any restrictions, will be for everybody overflowing. We're in verse 11. I won't banish the locusts from you, so they won't destroy your field or your soil, your vines. Everything won't happen anymore. We talked about great locust attacks in the past, talked about prophets, and here, right, the Bnei Israel are suffering, and the things are not so simple economically for them. And God says, be good to me, and you'll see it will change. Verse 12, and all the nations will be happy because of you, right? And they will come to you because you won't have any more drought. You won't have any more famine. Everybody's going to come to you. You're going to be the most desired land. You've spoken hard words against me, God said. But you ask, what have we been saying against you? I'm telling you, you've done things wrong. You're saying, well, I didn't say anything. What are you talking about? Amartem shav oved Elohim. You said it's useless to serve God. When we listen to you, God, what do we gain? What do we get that? We built the temple. And so, we say the arrogant are happy. Those who've done evil have endured. They've indeed dared God and escaped. I don't see the reward and justice, God, the reward and punishment. God, yeah, we haven't been perfect, but why should we when we see, terrible nations, terrible people? This is coming, right? This is the end of the Nevi'im, the end of the prophets, beginning of the transition from the time of prophets to the time of sages, to the time of consideration. And one of the great questions that we have during the period when there is no more prophets, when there's God is much less in the world, when God is not, there's not strict justice or strict mercy. God's not saying, you're bad, I'm going to destroy your temple. Spoke Lashon, I'm going to cut out your tongue. It's much more difficult to decipher reward and punishment in this world. The rabbis were troubled by that. The rabbis say, Schar mitzvah b'ha'el maleka, in the Talmud, they say that reward and punishment are not in this world, which is the direct contradiction of what we say daily in the Shema prayer. Shema says, right, in the second paragraph, if you listen to God, you'll have rain, you'll have a good land, you'll have a lot of crops, you'll be wealthy. And if you don't, then you will quickly leave the land. This chapter, Bnei Israel is saying we don't see the reward and punishment. So we start to see, in a sense, the transition from the time of prophecy to God being less involved, in a sense, in the world, the world being turned over more to human beings, and thus the justice, the reward and punishment that we would expect from God, we don't see it in the same way, and thus the people are confused. Continue verse 16. Az nidbaru yirei Adonai yishal reo v'yakshev Adonai v'shmu v'yichatev sefer zikaron lefanav l'yirei Adonai l'chosh v'shmo. In this vein, those who revere God have been talking to one another. God has heard. God notes it. God is going to write it in the scroll. And those who revere and esteem God. So, right, you might see that justice has escaped, that those who are sinners are still here. But just know that God is listening, and there are these books, whatever that means, like we say in Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, that God is writing everything down. And the reward will come by you. And I'm preparing for the day when when those who have listened to me, that they're going to get the treasure. They're going to get the rewards. And I will reward them. I will tender them this reward, just as a man tenders a reward towards a son who acts properly to him. This is right. We have different analogies, different of the relationships. It descriptions the relationship between God and Bnei Yisrael. Very often, lovers, husband and wife. Here we have the father and son. I'm going to give you. You don't see it right now, but you've been kind to me, you've been good to me, child, and you will get the reward. And then you'll see the difference between the righteous and the wicked, between the one who serves God and the one who doesn't serve God. So you don't see it now, but it will happen. We're in verse 19. Now we get back to the apocalypse. The day is at hand. It's going to burn like an oven. The arrogant and the evil, right? They will be like straw that God is going to burn them up into ashes. Nothing will be left. But you who are respectful to me, right? The sun will rise, and it will be a sun of victory, and it will bring healing, and you will be fat and fed well, like stall-fed calves, not like the calves that have to run around looking for food, the ones that are living in the lap of luxury in the beautiful barn. And you will trample the wicked to a pulp, and they will be the dust beneath your feet. I am getting ready for that. Zichru Torah Moshe. Be mindful. Remember the Torah of Moshe. Again, God saying, I'm not going to be here. I'm not going to be speaking to the prophets anymore. You want to know my word? Go and remember the Torah of Moshe. Avdi, my servant, Asher tziviti oto b'chorev, al kol Yisrael chukim mishpatim. Who all the way back at Chorev, all the way back at Sinai, I gave him the laws and the statutes. That's who you're going to have to go turn to if you want to know what I have to say. Reward and punishment is going to change. My relationship with the Jewish people is going to change. We talked about in the book of Zechariah, he talks about the prophets will not stay here forever. It's going to end. And this, according to traditional Jewish understanding, is the end. This is about the year 450 or so, something like that, before the Common Era. And with these verses, prophecy ceases. And here we turn to the last couple of verses. Probably the most famous ones in the book of Malachi, although we've had a few famous ones. Hine anochi sholeach lachem et Eliah hanavi lifnei bo yom Adonai hagadol v'hanora. I'm going to send Eliah, spelled without the vav. There's a whole big, lots of writing about why it's without the vav and the significance of that. But let's leave that out for now and just say, I am sending you Eliyahu hanavi. The idea of Eliyahu as the Mevaser, as the person who announces the Messiah is going to come at the end of days, before the great and awesome day. Why Eliyahu? Well, I would say Eliyahu was the guy who always said that the Jews were bad over and over again. He was the only one. Kneti lelohim. I'm the one who's zealous for God. Nobody else listens to your covenant. I'm the only one. So Eliyahu, when Eliyahu is convinced that the Jewish people have listened to God, which is not an easy sell, Eliyahu is going to come. And then he's going to announce this apocalypse, perhaps, and the Messiah, and a nirvana, utopian future. And what will be represented with this? Ve'shiv le'vavot al banim ve'lev banim al avotam tanavo v'iketi et aretz cherem. And what will happen? These relationships, the children with the parents with the children, the families will be put back together, the difficulties of generations, us saying about the nostalgic past, and every generation we have it, the kids, you don't understand us. If you were our age, you would get it. Look at what you did. The world is going to be put together. The ideas of the different generations, which are oftentimes butting heads against each other, they are going to be put together. And that needs to happen, lest the whole world will have destruction. And so here in this chapter, we have Bnei Israel are complaining. They're worried. They don't see justice. And God says, you don't see justice because you don't act correctly. You don't bring the maser. You don't bring the proper ties to the temple. The Jews are following the bad leadership of the priests who are treating the temple disrespectfully. And you say, why should we do it? God doesn't. The wicked endure. They get whatever they want, but they're not suffering. And the understanding is the world is changing. It's not a time of reward and punishment the way it's been before. It's coming to a time where you have to remember the Torah of Moshe. You want to understand God, you want to live the right way. That's what you have to do. Look in. We're moving from the age of prophecy to the age of wisdom. And with that, that's the way it's going to be until, hopefully, in the near future, Elijah appears, convinced finally that the Jewish people have kept the covenant with God, and thus the rosy days of everybody getting along, kumbaya, will begin. We say chazak chazak benit chazek to the book of Malachi. We say it to the Trei Asar, and we say it to Sifrei Nivi'im. All of the books of the prophets started a long time ago with Yehoshua, God coming to Joshua and saying, "Get up, my servant Moshe is dead, and now you need to lead the Jewish people into Israel." And we bookended in this chapter with God says, Zichru Torat Moshe Avdi, remember the Torah of Moshe, my servant. So even though Moshe is long dead, he's still here in the beginning and the end of the book of the Nevi'im, the prophets and their messages. While sometimes difficult to decipher, sometimes archaic and not necessarily relevant, there are so many of them that are relevant to us today. And we say, we will return to you. Chazak, chazak, minit chazek. Congratulations on the completion of these great books.